Hi there, my name is Gail Wellstead and I'm a human-centered designer at Common Thread, and I'm very delighted to be sharing some tools and thoughts and approaches with you today. So I'm going to jump into session 3, behavioral research, and let's take it away. So this is where you are in terms of your progress. So this is all about an introduction to human-centered design and also how to use HCD in research. So the first little video that you're watching right now will be this introduction, and then I'll make another little video for the use of HCD in your own work. So, an introduction to human-centered design. Now, you might know some things already, and I'm sure you all do. You might be doing the same thing by a different name. So let's jump into what human-centered design actually means. So when you Google human-centered design, you get a lot of graphics and a lot of communication illustrations trying to talk about what human-centered design is. And this is really a way of trying to get people into the dialogue and a conversation about how to do design and how to keep people at the center of the solutions that we are designing. So it's really, first off, about making sure that we have the brief, we have the right brief. So to do that, we go out and we discover, we expand our thinking. So this is why you often get a triangle sort of expanding. We try to learn everything we can about the context, the people we need to design for, the systems and services that are involved in the ecosystem where we want to have an impact. So we basically discover, and that's really why you get this outward growth of thinking and ideas and insight. And then after we have all that, we sort of tend to synthesize or refine what we have learned. So this is when we get to just analyzing everything we've understood, everything we've found. We check if we're actually solving the right brief. Maybe we need to tweak the brief. We've learned something new in our discovery process. We're actually, this is a problem, but if we make a difference over here, we'll solve this and it's a bigger impact. Or maybe we need to reframe a challenge from the point of view of a specific community or whoever is within the ecosystem where we can make an intervention and make an impact. So that's really distilling, refining, and that's why you get a sort of converging moment in some of these diagrams. So you go out and then you come back in. So then by that point, you have a really clear idea of who you need to involve in the design process, who you want to make an impact for, who you want to design for, how you might want to do it, how you want to approach it, and really refining in what that brief is based on what you've learned. And then after you do that, you go back out wide, which is why we tend to get a lot of diagrams that expand again. So we're really in a generative mode then. We're trying to develop ideas, as many as possible. Where do we think the right place is to make an intervention? What kind of scales need to be? What kind of medium, service, product? What kind of tools at our discretion? We're really trying to expand the possibility of what we might be able to achieve. And then after that, we go into delivery. So we sort of try to refine again. We come back in to a very specific point where we use testing, we share our ideas with people, we make prototypes, little versions of things that we can take out into communities and show them, get their feedback, make them better, or actually say, this isn't going to work, and make something else and test it again. So we're really in a sort of community-driven focus there, trying to make sure that we're solving the brief for the right people, maybe even involving them in the design as much as possible. And then at the end, we come back and we hopefully have a solution, or one or two or three, responding to the brief that we've refined and ready to let out into the world, to pilot it, to test it again, and make sure that we understand that whatever we put out into the world is iterative. So these diagrams is really a communication tool to talk about how we do this and how people can be involved. So what is it? So this is a framework that comes back again and again and again, and is really baked into that discovery phase and the development phase when we're expanding our minds and trying to understand how we want to make solutions. We want to keep in mind that we have to design something that is desirable for the people that we want it to be desirable for. So we're making it easy for them, we're making it appealing for them, it's solving their problems because we've gone out and we've understood what their problems actually are. Feasible is much more about the resources and the capacity of people that we need to be involved in the solutions. So if we come up with a big idea, but we actually don't have anyone to own it, or we don't have anyone to fund it, then it's not going to be feasible to actually bring out into the real world. So we have to bring in those constraints to make sure that we actually can make something and we can make it real. And finally, sustainability. So this is about making sure that beyond feasibility, we can sustain the idea. Once it's out in the real world, we can make sure that it is reliable for people. So if we're designing a service, we want to make sure that if we promise this is going to solve somebody's problems, and over time it deteriorates and it stops solving people's problems for whatever reason, then we need to make sure that actually we're thinking with a long-term view that this will be sustainable, whatever we're putting out into the world. So without human-centered design, a lot of things can get lost in translation. So this is one of the reasons why you have a lot of visual communication tools, because what human-centered design does is bring in people that we're designing for as many times as we can across the process of design. So we go out and we get ideas, and then we understand what we've learned, and we go back to people and say, this is what we understood, is this your problem? And then they tell us a bit more. We develop some ideas, we show them our ideas, and they say, yes, this solves my problem. Yes, this is good. No, that doesn't work. What is this supposed to do? So we're always talking to people to understand what we're doing and how impactful it's going to be and how relevant it is. And so this is a humorous illustration of what might happen if you don't go back to the community or don't involve them as much as possible along the way. So in the first image on the left, the customer explained it like this. They wanted to have a swing that them and two friends could sit on at the same time and have lots of fun. But maybe the project leaders listened to the interview, and actually they said, we want to swing right underneath the canopy of the tree. So the swing is next to the trunk, it wouldn't swing, so it wouldn't really work. The analyst designed it like this. So they heard again that they want to swing directly underneath the canopy of a tree. And so they created this space, which looks particularly awkward and precarious. The tree may not be stable. And then the programmer wrote it like this. So again, trying to get the swing as close to the center of the tree as possible. But actually what the customer really wanted was just something really simple. They wanted to be underneath the tree. They wanted space for them and some friends to sit on it. And actually this is solving their problem or their need. So this is really an example of making sure that you go back to the community and say, well, this is what we heard and this is what we think would help you, and giving them an opportunity to have input again and again in the process to make sure that we're getting closer and closer and closer to something that will meet their needs. And so how do you do it? Consulting or involving the intended user at every step of the process, as I was saying. So we're going out and we're doing research, we're designing ideas, we're developing ideas and testing them and putting them out into the real world and piloting. And so bring people in as much as possible. And ideally, as designers in the solutions to their own challenges, bearing in mind people's capacity in time and resources, and making sure that you're designing a process that suits the people you want to involve. Framing a challenge from the point of view of the user's need, not the service providers. And this is why we have tools that help put people at the center throughout, because when you're maybe in your team and you're further away from the people that you spoke to, it's easy to forget some of the detail that they gave you. Using an established set of tools and methods to put the user at the center, exactly what I was just saying. Considering the whole environment that our users are situated within and how the characteristics impact their lives and choices every day. So making sure that our research involves learning about competing priorities, environmental constraints and opportunities that people have, desires, experiences that influence the way that people behave and choose to do things, and how their needs are being met or not being met by other experiences. Resulting products, services, or behaviors should be easy to adopt and or desirable. So we really want to make sure that people can do what they want to do as easily as possible, and make sure that, we might design the perfect service for people to solve their needs, a health service, but if it's too far away or it's too expensive or they don't know it's there, it's making sure that it's as easy as possible in as many ways as possible with all the tools at our disposal. And then considering system level stakeholders so solutions can be feasible and sustainable. So Often we are focusing on community needs, but also we need to think about the needs of the people who serve communities as well. They are people within the ecosystem, and we want to center them as much as possible as well to make sure that whatever we design doesn't create stress for them, it's possible for them, they feel excited to deliver and be involved in the process. So it's really about looking at people within the whole ecosystem and centering people as much as possible. And so these are some of the tools that help us get there. On the left, we use empathy mapping to understand people's experiences and needs. And this can really help us out when we speak to people and we observe them and we look at what they're saying and we think about what they're thinking about things, their ideas, their beliefs. And we also look at what they're doing and what they're feeling. And we draw these things out of our in-depth research to understand what people actually need. And quite often what we're looking for here is mismatches and gaps. So quite often people say they do something if they think they should be doing something, or they want to seem like they're doing something, but actually when we look at what they say they do or what they're actually doing, they're not doing those things. So why is there those gaps between say and do? And so that's where we can really learn to understand what the challenges are for people to do the things that they want to do. Stakeholder mapping. So this is looking at people's environments and influences. So if we're centering people, what kind of influences in the community, what kind of resources are in the community, what kind of services do they have access to, and what kind of institutions are there to support and systems to support that are maybe influencing them or can be leveraged to make an impact. So we're looking at those relationships that they have within their environment. And finally, things like prioritization matrices, can help us understand what will make an impact, but it will also be possible or feasible, as we spoke about before. So that's really about looking about what resources and capacity we have as an organization, centering the people there, understanding what's possible for them to achieve, what's exciting for them to achieve, what's easy and desirable for them, but then also making sure that we're creating as much user value or community value as possible in our solutions. So what's the perfect balance of those two things? We need to make sure that they are aligned and will be a good match. So human-centered design in action. How might we improve the experience of wearing shoes? Now, it would be great if you pause the video and you can spend a couple of minutes just thinking about this. Is it possible? Do you have a favorite pair of shoes that you think can't possibly be better? Or maybe you have found a challenge in finding the perfect pair of shoes, and so you think this is actually a big problem. But there are loads of shoes in the world, and you might not think that we can improve the experience of wearing shoes because there's so much choice. Well, let me show you an example. So Matthew Waltzer is an American teenager. He might be an adult now, but this is his story. So my dream is to go to the college of my choice without having to worry about someone coming to tie my shoes every day. I've worn Nike basketball shoes all my life. I can only wear this type of shoe because I need ankle support to walk. At 16 years old, I am able to completely dress myself, but my parents still have to tie my shoes. How embarrassing. As a teenager who is striving to become totally self-sufficient, I find this extremely frustrating and at times embarrassing. So what Matthew didn't maybe realize when he wrote this letter is that it's a very good design brief because we know what his need is, we know why he needs it, and we know how he feels about the situation. So it's very engaging for designers to receive, and immediately you can see why this would be a really important problem to solve for Matthew. He needs to be independent, he needs to go off into the world and study and go in his own path, but he has this major barrier that he has demonstrated in this wearing shoes. And so Matthew has cerebral palsy, and so he has an inability to put shoes on by himself. So Nike got the message, and as I was saying before, it's a good brief, and so they did something about it, which is, in my opinion, fantastic. And so this is what they came up with. They came up with the Nike Fly Ease. And so this is a shoe that you can put on with limited hand motor ability. And it's very easy, it's not time consuming, it's not adding another problem to Matthew's day. And so what they did was they came up with lots of ideas, and they involved Matthew and others in testing them until they came up with this idea. And so here's a little video of the second version of Fly Ease. It was so popular, they decided to make more and more versions. And then they're going to go on very easily. don't even need hands. I mean, you might say, well, a pair of flip-flops does the same thing, but if you're in a certain context where you can't wear flip-flops every day, you might need a pair of shoes with a bit more security and a bit more warmth. So this is really providing Matthew with an opportunity to go about his life independently, and it has really made an incredible difference. He was very grateful, and not only Matthew, but it has made a big difference to others in the world. So, and what I mean by that is paying attention to the needs of edge cases, so to speak, what we perceive to be extreme cases. I think quite often they're not, but maybe in the media and the information that we consume, we don't think this is a common problem. So paying attention to these edge cases can more extreme users has shown to benefit more people. So if you pause the video again, you might want to think about what other group of people might benefit from this shoe. There might be other people who struggle to put on shoes for lots of different reasons, either temporarily or longer term. And they may not even realize that it's possible to solve this problem. And so they didn't ask for it to be solved, but actually it has been solved by Nike. And they're on the third, fourth, or fifth iteration of the shoe. There's many styles now, and it's proved very popular because people like stroke patients, pregnant women, teenagers on the go. You probably recognize putting your shoes on and off without untying the laces when you were younger. City workers wanting to slip between sneakers and workwear when they get to the office, and also other physical abilities that may be able to put on shoes, people with arthritis, but actually it'd be much nicer if they didn't have to tie laces or use any kind of mechanism or use their hands at all to put on shoes. So you can see how responding to real human need for one person or a small group can actually create value for a lot more people. And so this is why we think it's very valuable to focus on people when we design solutions. So one thing I mentioned before is iteration, very briefly. So if you remember, well done. Prepare for iteration because things change. So in design, we like to think that our solutions are living and breathing ideas. Once we put them out into the world, they need to be able to respond and learn from the way that people are using them, because things change, people change, context change. And so we need to learn from these changes and adapt things to make sure that they are still fit for purpose. And so this is a nice example where this lovely green park, which I'm sure is very appreciated by people in the area, in the urban area, access to green space is really good for you and really, really improving of health. So this is potentially used to be more of a leisure garden where people would come and stroll and they weren't in a rush. But obviously now people are in a rush and maybe don't feel inclined to walk around this flower bed. And unfortunately, the flowers are not blooming right now. But you can see that people have created this extra path. Maybe shops have been opened at one end of the park, and so now there's lots of traffic. Maybe there's a different type of user using it. And so it's created this need for a new path through speed or intention of getting through the park faster. And so we might want to think about how these paths could adapt in a more meaningful way to this change of use. And so we always like to look out for how our designs are being used so that we can respond and develop them. And so back to how human-centered design can complement behavioral science, which you've already learned something about, by bringing a holistic view of the user, their needs and their environment they live within. It brings context to the challenge, both in scope and making sure solutions are feasible and sustainable. And so this is where we really like to focus on the sweet spot. So in human-centered design, we like to put people's desires, priorities, and experiences at the center of design, and also being aware that involving them as much as possible will get us closer and closer to meeting those. And in behavioral science, we understand the context that drives human behavior and motivation. So it's really a nice marriage of two different disciplines where we're trying to work out how we can help people, how we can learn about the influences and forces and the environment that they're living within, and how we can make things easier for them. And so I will stop there. Thanks for listening.